So, good evening and welcome to Dusty Feet. It's March 23rd, 2023, and we have another one of our special series episodes, The Sons of the Father. We're continuing our discussion of The Chosen, created by Dallas Jenkins, and we'll be talking about Season 1, Episode 6, Indescribable Compassion. And as always, during this series, my dad, John Wern, my brother, Jim Wern, and of course myself will be chatting about and sharing things that have impacted us along our journey. So, welcome to another episode of The Sons of the Father. And we have Outside the Class, where we want you to review the material before we start chatting about it. It's kind of like homework. We're still in the Matthew series with Tim Mackey. We try to keep these to around 15 minutes or so, easy to catch, and even easier to catch up on. I do link all the videos for each week in advance on the dustyfeet.com on the Outside the Class page. And those videos, they premiere every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. In the description below are links to all of the audio, video, and source documents that we use here in the Dusty Feet. We want to make sure that any material we use here is properly credited to those folks who work so hard to bring it to us. Without their efforts, the learning we do here does not happen. Don't forget to subscribe. Click that bell icon if you want a reminder. And as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place we can safely explore the endless ways of God and interconnection of His creation. Where belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. So here we go with some more Sons of the Father on the Dusty Feet. So here we are, the Sons of the Father. So again, something we do want to reference up front. Sometimes issues can arise from discussions like these and the assumptions that that we have on the other people that are listening, right? It is unintentional. But if you don't understand something or you have questions concerning something that we have discussed, please feel free to comment down below and we will respond as best we can. Or you can just send an email to bob@thedustyfeet.com because sometimes it's just easier to ask questions in a more private manner. So, that said, gents, Season 1, Episode 6, Indescribable Compassion. How'd it hit you? Daddy-o.
Well, a thought, a couple of thoughts. One is how great it is to be able to spend this time with you guys. We've never spent so much time together in the 80 years, the 60 years you guys have been around, and it's crazy. But um, it's this episode is off the charts. Last week, Jim said something about that episode was more, and that I think that word fits this episode even more so. It's just there's just so much going on, and the foundation of where Dallas is going is getting a little broader and stronger as he starts gathering his disciples. And that in the beginning, I don't know about you guys, but I was scratching my head, going, "What? Where are we in a pawn shop? Guy, what's he selling and doing?" And even when he found out he was a leper, still I did not go
Yeah.
down the path where later on Jesus would be meeting him and healing him and all. Um, but Dallas obviously knew exactly what he was doing with this, and he throws that in as kind of a teaser or a hook even, because you're wondering where he's going with this story. I thought it's interesting that Matthew continues to wrestle
Hmm.
with what Jesus did. It just doesn't make sense. And he's a numbers guy, so everything's got to make sense.
Mhm.
You line it up, you add or subtract, you put it in a box, and that's the answer. And it's not there. And wherever he goes, he ends up getting in arguments with people about it. And then Nicodemus is kind of doing the same thing with John. He goes down there and he spends time in episode 5 with John, and then he comes here and he's actually defending him
Mhm.
to the Pharisees, and both of them though are quite, it's drawing them in more. He wants to, as we see later in the episode, Mary, what's going on? He doesn't even know how to can't get his arms around it because it's so foreign to what he's ever experienced. And I in my own life, I've had those same situations where what's going on around you doesn't make any sense. Um, I've met some people in other countries in villages that are with disabilities, and they've got this incredible attitude that just lights up the room. And I remember meeting a lady in Russia. She lived in a 1,500 bed facility for the broken, and they just stuffed everybody in there,
Hmm.
whether they had depression, they didn't know, and she was disabled. And it was right out of a horror movie. You walk down the hallways, and the lights in the hallway are flickering,
Hmm.
and it's dark. And there's probably 300 people in this 1,500 bed facility at that time. And you see this light down the hallway. Hallway is pretty long, and you walk in there, and there she is, kind of deformed. But it turns out that her deformity came from the wheelchair that she had, that they gave her. Her body just grew right into the chair itself,
Hmm.
into her side, right under her ribs. But she just had this incredible personality, and we had to tell her that we didn't have a chair that would work for her because of the way that her body grew. And we went away with blessing because she was just so gracious. I understand all of that. She prayed for us and all. It was just, and those are the things that I I I see here in this episode, that these men are confused by what they saw. And how does that happen to someone? What does that person have that they can be joyful, or what, John the Baptist in prison, or the Matthew and his thing? But those, I've got other things, but those things really stood out to me, and again remind me of my own life and my own struggles with how can they be so happy, and I struggle sometimes with melancholy or whatever. So
Hmm.
next.
Jimmy.
Well, this one so far, by far, has been my favorite episode, and I'm sure they're going to keep getting. Well, then the next one's going to be my favorite, and the next one, and so on. But I think I cried most of the episode. I'm glad my wife wasn't there when I was watching it because she would have made fun of me. Um, but it was interesting. This one felt like it should have been subtitled "I See You," because it felt like there was a lot of revelations um,
Mm.
that took place, good and bad.
I like
I mean,
that.
you got the
Yeah.
preacher, looking at Matthew, and he's saying, I see you, you're different. You're not just the typical Jew, which we've seen, but it's like more layers of that.
Mhm.
I like you, Matthew, because of who you are.
Mhm.
You're different. The leper being seen by the pawn shop guy, all of a sudden he's revealed. But then later on, Jesus sees him, and it's a whole different kind of see.
Mhm.
I see you for who you are, not for
Mhm.
what you are experiencing.
Mm.
And of course, with Matthew, you see him seen there. You see him seen by the kids up on the roof, like, "Hey, come on up, come on up." You're like one of us. And then later on, we see Jesus at the very end. He turns and he sees Matthew, and he looks at him, and Matthew feels seen.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, I lost it at that point. It was just so powerful.
Mhm.
Mary seeing the Ethiopian woman in the crowd trying to get her friend, in to be healed.
Mhm.
Um, it was just so much of that was going on. Even Nicodemus seeing Jesus differently. He's not this guy who's trying to create something, or seeing John differently also. They're not rebels here. There's something going on, and it's like eyes are being opened throughout the whole thing, and it was just powerful to me. I think it was fun. I love what Dallas does to just bring in some humorous aspects to it, probably to lighten the "oh my gosh, this is killing me" aspect of the episodes.
Mhm.
um Peter, playing both PR and protector of Jesus. Hey, how do you like listen to this guy, he's got good stuff to hear, and then watching out for him to make sure he doesn't get arrested.
Yeah.
Peter, again, we're going to continue to see his character unfold
Mhm.
in very powerful ways. But to
Mhm.
me, it was just one of those episodes that I don't know. It opened up so much, and of course, there's lots of questions that continue to
Right.
be to come to the surface, and
Right.
so it is. He's drawing us in to this
Mm.
story, and I'm loving every bit of it.
Yeah. He, again, we've mentioned this. We'll continue to mention to people watching that these are not Bible stories.
Right.
They are stories about Bible stories. That's important
Mm-hmm.
because there's creative elements involved all over the place. Um, nothing that we have any problem with so far. At least the three of us have nothing we've talked
Yeah.
about. Um, so it's interesting to watch how each of the steps, like you said, we saw a leper introduced in the opening scene, and then we're going to see him again later.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a pattern that we're now beginning to see from Dallas, that we're going to see those other things. He'll flip characters. His his discussion. We have Nicodemus and Shmuel talking, and it's an interesting. You almost hear Nicodemus like he's ready to be Paul.
Hmm.
Okay, he says
Mm-hmm.
we can help these people understand this. That's what you hear him tell Shmuel. And he was bantering, and that
Mm-hmm.
some of the back and forth banter on that was absolutely fantastic. I got some notes on that, but I, for me, this the story in this episode, for me personally, is the one that started me on this journey that I'm on.
Hmm.
Okay, and it's Dad that asked the question. So I was in the middle of just getting out of a job and then losing the job. And in this point, then Dad had come to me and we are talking about the logistics. He said, how do they get the paralytic to go through the roof? Okay. Can that really happen?
Mm-hmm.
And how would that be? And we were talking about some stuff and different things that went around it. And I think in this, they showed a very a practical way to
Mm-hmm.
make that happen. But in that, it was part of that searching and discussing and looking at the stories again that you then you start to reread them, and you get the things like he said it in the episode, your sins are forgiven.
Yeah.
Now we could debate how that plays out
Mm-hmm.
at another time, but suffice to say that he says it, and he hasn't died yet. So there's all kinds of dynamics that come up from there, which was partial to this, and as is grew. So it started me on this, and started me on looking into and rereading scripture and starting back. And then when I went through this, I said, I pumped the brakes literally and said, if I'm going to do this, I might as well start back in Genesis. It didn't make much sense to jump at the last third of the book. Let's go, a little earlier. So there was had a sentimental spot in me, just because it was one of the things that clued me off here. But that talk with Shmuel, and I wrote a couple of, where's my, it said here, because they're bouncing back and forth about how they're going to, Shmuel is wrestling with what John is saying,
Right.
and he wants him branded as something. And Nico replies to him, if God did something that you felt contradicted the Torah, would you tell him to get back in that box that you have carved out for him? Or would you question your interpretation of the Torah? Okay. And then I stepped back and I said, so is that really in that question? Because for me, and Dusty Feet is we're, them, they, or us, that I actually hear that question asked today.
Yeah.
In other words, that is an old question that has current contemporary brackets around it. Yeah. Some things might not be, on that setup, but this did. And then he said, we are all still students, Shmuel.
Yeah.
Our understanding will never be complete. And then he answers back and says, it frightens me that I can no longer predict your rulings. And his answer was, and fear alone ensures that we remain ignorant, asleep in the safety of a rigid tradition. That's the thing that scares him. He said, God gave us his law and we must uphold it. We can do both. Let's look at the ancient roads where the good way is and walk it, as Jeremiah said, and still keep our eyes open to the startling and the unexpected. And I went, I can bite that. And then he was trying to get Shmuel to say, can we at least agree to that? And Shmuel shook his head like, okay, that very midrash,
reluctant
right?
agreement. Yes.
But it's like, and almost to the point there, because he still doesn't agree.
Yeah.
And they agree to disagree. And Nico's just looking for one bit of common ground. There is a point where he's not going to get Shmuel to go, but that one point of common ground, and that is keep your eyes open to the startling and the unexpected, where Shmuel sees it. And then in that next move, when you see him looking in the window, then his answer was, disturber the peace. Okay. So he viewed that incident entirely different than the rest of the crowd, including Nicodemus that was there, viewed it in a totally different manner. So there's a lot in that has that piece. So
have you guys seen the preview to the new movie Jesus Revolution that's coming out next month?
No.
Is that the one about Chuck Smith?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go online at some point and look at the preview. Kelsey Grammer's in it. He plays Chuck, which amazes me. but who's the actor that plays Jesus? Jonathan Rumi or whatever his name is.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's in it also. And it's interesting because a lot of the same dynamic is going on. Chuck is seeing this group of marginalized hippies that the world is saying these guys, don't take them seriously. And then Jonathan's character says these are young people looking for love or significance or value or whatever, but they're just looking in the wrong place. And the church is rejecting them rather than saying, hey, you're questioning, that's a good thing, ask questions, come here and ask those questions, kind of thing. And that's what Jesus was doing. He's reaching out to this marginalized community of people who weren't part of the same crowd that typically was the supporters of the church at the time, the type of worship that was going on.
Mhm.
And Nicodemus is beginning to realize, we have to look at this differently, because that's what Jesus is doing. So it's like both of the timing of watching the preview of that one in this episode was like, wow, we're in a very similar time right now.
Well, it's a divisive. I mean, when we see these stories, we have some ideas. We already put our some spin on it, right? And we're looking at these, and we see the feeding of 4,000, we see the feeding of 5,000. We get that, but you realize that the truth is that not everybody agrees, and it puts the country in turmoil. Eventually, when by the time we get to Jerusalem, it's torn.
Right.
Because you have some people are supporting, and then the other ones come over. Because it's not like everybody all of a sudden was on board with Jesus. Didn't work that way. We maybe we want to think it, but not. So there's a lot that's going on that we only have just a very small part of the story that's going on, but it is the important part of the story to tell moving forward. Yeah.
Well, I think going along with what you guys are talking about, I'm trying to think of the guy that was in the. I thought that the part that Rumi was playing in that movie was one of Chuck's proteges, which now has a huge church and has big arenas full of people and going forward and all that. I can't think of his name, but the disciples are amazed at the healing of the leper. First they're John draws his knife and rightly so. In those days, it was a terrifying thing. Guys covers up his face. Don't breathe, don't breathe.
They don't understand.
And
Yeah, they don't understand.
no, they don't. But the leper says, "Please don't turn away." Yeah, that's when you're crying because Jesus says, "I won't." And I had mentioned to you guys before, that's when I went to that colony in Thailand, a leper colony. I don't know, it's been probably 15 years ago now. Nothing like the rejection that they get, but these people still live there. They don't go into the community. They have a store there. They have their hairdressers there. They have everything that comes to them. They do not go out of there. Even today,
Wow.
they're rejected by a lot of the people. And I, when I was there, I felt myself just a little bit sensitive to it. I met a few. They don't try to shake your hand. They don't try to do any of that. But I don't know what I would have done. And I remember when I went to Ghana one time with Johnny, we went to an HIV hospital. And she was the only one of us that went into the rooms and talked with the people, held their hands, prayed with them. And the rest of us, we should be we should be doing that, as we're all sitting in the lobby talking about it. Not all of us, it was about 4 of us there. But how do we get to that point in our lives when we're willing to go up. He just walks up and hugs the dude. You know, I mean, he gives him I mean, the guy had to stink to high heaven
Yeah.
and all of that. And it's embarrassing to a degree for me to think back on that. I had a chance to uh, to do that along by myself in another room, meeting somebody else. Later on, I met a couple of folks with HIV that came in and got wheelchairs from us. But I'm just talking about that's their second nature. Jesus never thought
Hmm.
about it. He just now they couldn't wait to give him a tunic when he said anybody got a tunic. You know, they're all taking off their
Yeah.
tunics. You know, I just want one's fine.
Hmm.
But that's the thing. I want to be. That makes you want to be like Jesus. I say that because that's the kind where those kind of barriers don't stand in the way. And
Yeah.
that just really touched me.
Yeah. Funny you say that. I literally posted on
You
Friday
thought that was
on
funny.
that special um, episode that I had on forgiveness, and we
Mm,
talked about wanting to be like Jesus, but
Hmm.
mhm,
not that. I want to live the Father's ways, but not that way. You know, and it is. It's and we see that we're seeing that with the disciples. We see that in the stories, plain, pure, and simple. So
Bob, you said something last week when we were talking, and we were talking about that I would die for my wife. And the question was, but would you live for her?
mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
and you hear that a lot. I'd die for
Hmm.
my kids,
yeah,
but I'm sorry, I have to go to work
Yeah.
7 days this week, and I can't meet you at the baseball game, and I can't,
yep,
and I can't.
hmm,
Hmm.
yeah. There's and then you know what the frightening part is, that then Jesus gives us a story and shows us he does both, and you're like, that's something,
Mm.
um, to live and die for us. Um,
And I think that's the thing
yeah.
that Nicodemus and Matthew are struggling with right now. He doesn't look for any fame or any glory, and he just does it
Yeah.
because that's who he is. And
Well, they have boxes. You mentioned Matthew and the logic side of things, and Shmuel with his with as Nicodemus made it clear, it was your interpretation of Torah. He made that very clear. And Matthew's is his logic box, right? So both of them are struggling with the boxes, and he's not fitting. Something isn't there. For Shmuel, it's unsettling. For Matthew, it's unsettling. But where Matthew has enough intrigue, and maybe it's with innocence from Matthew, maybe
Mhm. Mhm.
um, that uh, he's gonna chase it down. Shmuel is trying to squish it because he's comfortable in the box. That discussion he has with Nicodemus, the reality is no. He he doesn't want to go outside the box. But understand, we're busy trying to throw Jews under the bus. I said, stop. Let's go walk into any of our communities today. Thank you very much. We're doing the same exact thing. Guy doesn't fit, and so they don't fit in this box. So go check the building next door if you're on Church Row and a lot of little. I've lived in the South now for 20 plus years, and it's very common, especially east of the Mississippi, definitely Bible Belt scenario, where I call them Church Row. There'll be a street down there somewhere where there they are, and they're they're just lined up. So pick the next one until you something you're going to fit in their
Uh-huh.
box, because each of them have formed a box, and that's our problem collectively, is that we've made boxes that are impenetrable,
Mm.
and maybe we should improve. And trust me, the messianics don't have that right anyway, stretch or form. So I'm throwing greater religiosity. I call it churchanity. under the bus.
Hmm. Hmm.
Just on that fact of boxes and how we, we love to create them and decorate them and call them special, but
Yeah.
then they become very exclusive, meaning
I
we
liked it.
exclude things and exclude people.
Right.
Yeah.
I liked it when the kids were sitting up on the roof after it's over, and then Matthew climbs down, and he's doing his thinking about this, going, and what she says, are you
Lost.
lost?
Are you lost?
And
He said,
yeah, and he
yes, I am.
says, I think I might be,
Yeah. He
or
said,
yeah,
yes, I
because
am. Yeah. Yeah.
everything is practiced. Yeah,
Well,
I
the
just
kids, like you said, go back to the kids. He's sits down next to them. They take him in.
yeah.
Understand? He has Simon is talking to him, and that's going to continue. Spoiler alert. That's going to continue. And but they take him in. So they give him what? They give him things to eat. Here's some figs. Eat the fig. So he's eating figs and watching this all unfold because they're
Hmm.
comfortable with them sitting next to him because they're watching that, right? They're looking in the window. They're sitting up high above the crowd looking in the window.
Yeah.
They got the best seat in the house as far as the crowd's
Mm.
concerned, you know. And that gets the point. I wish so it's time to bring it
Yeah.
down. So we're looking at these times where maybe we can be better at being aware of moments, maybe,
Amen.
and maybe a little both. I'll go with be aware of moments and then hand a bowl of figs to the person next to you. Interesting thought, because they weren't drawn for religious banter with some street preacher in the deal. They were watching things happen.
Mm.
Interesting. Daddy.
Yeah. Uh, I'm just enjoying, as I said last week, I'm broken record. I'm just enjoying it. When they went to uh, the house, James and John's house, to see his mom, and what his mom comes out and she's just staring at Jesus, and he's talking. She's just staring at him. That's what you do when you run into a somebody that is you know famous in that. And I don't want that. I met James Garner when we were racing cars. He was a big race fan and really liked
I
Orrin.
was
And
thinking that the other day.
Yeah.
yeah, and there he is. He just walks in. He walks up to us, and I'm speechless. And he's talking to everybody, and I'm like, but when Jesus talks to us, he brings us all. We're all at the same level.
Yeah.
Nobody's special. Everybody's special. And that's one of the last things that I got out of it is that's what I want for my life. I want everybody to be special
There
in
you
my
go.
life. Yeah.
Jimmy.
So
I think the other thing that I noticed in this episode is how he teaches. He takes a situation and elaborates on it, and he takes a question and he draws something out, and he takes context to create an environment for people to listen and to learn. And I love that and want that kind of perspective, that no matter the moment, being present in the moment, and both present to what's going on, but present to what God is doing and responding appropriately.
yeah.
Um, and I see Jesus doing that, and that's the way to go.
Yeah. And the biggest twist that we will continue to remember is that Jesus spent an awful lot of time not answering questions as
Mm.
much as asking more questions
Mm-hmm.
and telling stories, and then just said, figure it out. and we'll
Yeah.
get there from that. So as we get this, just watch the story, do the deal, and figure it out. And then it was literally talk amongst yourselves. That's what we're continuing to foster here as we've continued this series, as we're enjoying very much so, talking about The Chosen, Dallas Jenkins doing a brilliant job. Again, this was episode 6, Indescribable Compassion. So, point to ponder. And again, I'm just going to bring it back up again because it continues to make, especially when you're looking at the people that are all involved, and you're looking at Simon, you're looking at Matthew, you're looking and you're watching these people develop, and you're going, have it been selected as the best or most appropriate? And you're seeing that and questioning that, which is what we do with ourselves. So, again, thanks for with us tonight on another special episode of The Sons of the Father on the Dusty Feet.